What's up, y'all? Jared Hoffman here with another edition of the Better Than Less Than podcast. Uh, I went blank on what I wanted to say, but hey, well, we was off last week. This October has been busy, guys. You got the football season. I got my other part-time jobs that I'm doing, so I'm trying to be here consistent with y'all to do these shows because I want to get my Division II and NAIA coverage because if I don't, who will? You know what I'm saying? But if you can, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. Please subscribe to become a level 1 or 2 members to get to the exclusive content from the HBCU Sports team. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, TikTok, we're on Blue Sky. Search HBCU Sports and you will find us there. Go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in sports. And you can go to hbcusports.com/donate to contribute to this operation monetarily. All right, we're going to get into the title of this video, which is the grades for mid-season, but just want to quickly talk about the CIAA Media Day. CIAA Basketball Media Day just went down, and we have the predicted order of finish for women's and men's basketball in the CIAA. I'm going to pull that up real quick. Just for a spoiler alert, the reigning champions, Fayetteville State and Virginia State, Fayetteville State's women, and Virginia State's men were both picked to repeat as champions. So Fayetteville State picked to win its third straight CIAA championship, which is very unheard of. It has not been done since Shaw won 4 straight from 2011 to 2014. So that would be a historic accomplishment for Tyrese Brown, who was brought in as an interim coach. Remember, he started his tenure at Fayetteville State as an interim coach and has a chance to win his third straight CIAA championship for the Fayetteville State women's basketball team, who has turned themselves into a powerhouse. As we look here at the CIAA's predicted order of finish, not sure if folks can see that, but if you can't, in the women's predicted order of finish, Fayetteville State was picked to win the conference, or at least finish atop the conference at the end of the regular season. Virginia State picked to finish second. They are the reigning runner-ups in the CIAA championship, and who moved on from Coach Nadine Doman, who is now, I believe, at Morgan State. I don't want to get that wrong. Hold on a second. I don't think it's Morgan State. I think it's another. I think she's somewhere else, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, we're doing this live. She is now it's Morgan State. I was right the first time. All right. So yes, Nadine Doman, now the women's basketball coach at Virginia State, and the team is now headed by Lord have mercy. It's been that kind of week, guys. The new women's basketball coach for Virginia State is Millette Green. So she will be tasked with getting Virginia State back to the CIAA championship game for the second straight year. My alma mater, the Bowie State Bulldogs, picked to finish third. Sade Swan led women's basketball team. Virginia Union picked to finish fourth. They just moved on from Tierra. Hold on, I was about to say her name completely wrong. Tierra Terry, is it? Lord have mercy. I'm sorry. Yeah, Tierra Terry. I keep second guessing myself. I know their names, but I just keep. Anyway, so Virginia Union picked to finish fourth. Claflin picked to finish fifth. Livingstone picked to finish sixth. Where Tierra Terry is now, Winston-Salem State, they are picked to finish seventh. Shaw eighth. Lincoln ninth. Elizabeth City State 10th. Johnson C. Smith 11th. And Bluefield State is picked to finish 12th. Moving on to the men's predicted order of finish in the CIAA. It's the Virginia State men being picked to finish atop the conference for the second straight year. And rounding out the field is Claflin at 2, Fayetteville State, who is now under the direction of Devin Hohen, who was previously coached at Bluefield State. We'll get to that in a second because I have a very big problem with Bluefield State's placement on this predicted order of finish. But to round out the field, Virginia Union picked to finish fourth. Lincoln picked to finish fifth. Johnson C. Smith picked to finish sixth. Shaw seventh. And the reigning defending CIAA runner-ups, Bluefield State, was picked to finish eighth. Let's round out the rest of the field, and then I'm going to talk about that. Bowie State picked to finish ninth. Livingstone picked to finish 10th. Elizabeth City State picked to finish 11th. And you have Winston-Salem State bringing up the rear in the last place position. All right. So Bluefield State, the reigning CIAA championship runner-ups, picked to finish not eighth in the conference. I have a big problem with that. Now, let me say where I can understand why that ranking the way it is the way that it is. The team is much different from what it was last year. You don't have Jordan Hines, who is your former CIAA Player of the Year, your all-time leading scorer. He's now gone. Devin Hohen, who built the culture at Bluefield State and got them to those two Cinderella runs, including making it to the championship game last year, he's no longer there. I completely understand that there's a lot of question marks. Hold on, let me close this real quick. There's a lot of question. Oh, Jesus. There's a lot of question. Lord have mercy. I need a producer. There is a lot of question. I understand that there are a lot of question marks surrounding Bluefield State. I completely get it. Totally get it. But it's not like they went and got some unproven coach. They went and got Luke DeLaggio that a couple of years ago had this team winning a CIAA championship and was in the CIAA championship game the year after that. So it's not like they got some novice coach that doesn't know how to turn around a program. They got Luke DeLaggio, who was at Bowie State for however many years and won multiple CIAA championships, got them to the Division II national tournament and made it to the Final Four of the CIAA tournament. Granted, it was over 20 years ago, but that shows his pedigree, that he had success then and he's had success recent in Fayetteville State. What makes you think that he's going to struggle that bad? I wouldn't have minded putting him at 5 or 4. 5 or 4, I feel like would have sufficed. But putting him at 8th, to me, 8th is overdoing it. It's very much overdoing it because you're overlooking the pedigree that he has shown to be able to lead a team to a championship. Granted, his last year at Fayetteville State didn't end the way that he wanted, ended short of the championship game, losing, ironically, to Bluefield State. But, you know, look, we're going to get into these mid-season grades. Before this season, I slept on Fayetteville State and Richard Hayes and the legacy that he has built at Fayetteville State. I thought he was on a downturn and that Fayetteville State was going to fall by the wayside to their CIAA competitors at the top of the standings. And I learned my lesson from that. They're doing the exact same thing with Luke DeLaggio. They're doing the exact same thing. I don't understand how you underestimate someone who recently, this is recent. This isn't like this was 10 years ago, the last time he won a CIAA championship. He won a CIAA championship like 3 years ago. It wasn't long ago. He was in the CIAA championship game the year after that. So this was not long ago. This is very recent. So I get it. There's going to be some growing pains. It's not going to be easy. His name is just going to get Bluefield State back into the CIAA championship picture. They're going to have to put in the work and to build that chemistry and find an identity. I understand that. But to say that they're going to be in the bottom half of the conference, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. And if there's one thing I know about the Bluefield State fan base, from being with them, from watching them at the CIAA tournament, is that they show up in numbers. It's not a lot of numbers, but they show up in numbers and they support their team very hard. And Bluefield State is a very tight knit group when it comes to the team and the fans, how they interact with each other. They are very unique in that matter. And in those years that they were in the CIAA championship game, they were the only one of the few teams without a band. When St. Aug was there too, they also didn't have one. So you talk about the fact that they don't have a band. They don't have anybody to get them hyped but their fans. And they play with that kind of grit. I think that's gonna grow with Luke Delagio as their coach. You know what I mean? I feel like he's going to embrace their way of doing things, and he's gonna have a very good season, and he's gonna blow that predicted order of finish out of the water. I wholeheartedly disagree with that ranking of 8th, but at the end of the day, they got to get out on court and prove that that's wrong. You know, we'll just have to see how motivated it makes them to prove that ranking wrong. And yeah, we'll looking forward to this upcoming basketball season, to say the least. All right, let's get into the title of this video, which is the mid-season rankings for the Division II and NAIA football, HBCU football teams. We're going to start with the CIAA, and I think we should just work our way from the bottom down on our way up. So starting with the team at the bottom of the standings, Lincoln. No surprise here. This F. This is a common theme with Lincoln. Sorry, I was getting my charger. There's a common thing with Lincoln. You know, unfortunately, they have not been able to live up to the promise that they showed. I believe it was either the 2022 or the 23 season. They have not been able to live up to the potential that they showed during that year when they had Isaiah Freeman, who's now at Hampton. You know, they just have not been able to replicate that success in any way. And yeah, they're the clear bottom team in the conference, and they have a clear F so far for the season. Hopefully they're able to just get through this season injury free and build going forward. But yeah, this season is pretty much a loss for them. Next up, we have Bowie, my alma mater, giving them a D outside of their season opening win. Now, this grade is not indicative of the final score. This is indicative of the results, unfortunately. Because if it was built upon how they actually looked, Bowie State was in the majority of those games. They were in it against Fayetteville State. They were in it against, who was it? Was it Livingstone? They were a point away from beating Livingstone. So this is not at all indicative of they do not play like their record at all. But this is a results business, and unfortunately, they have not been able to get those results. You know, and unfortunately, that Fayetteville State game kind of dropped down that ranking, because if it wasn't for the Fayetteville State game, they probably would have been at a C minus. But because of the Fayetteville State game, they dropped down to a D. Now let's go with the biggest surprise, probably of all of Division II football, across all the conferences, which is Virginia State. Virginia State has been the biggest shock of the season so far. Everyone, including me, expected them to be in the CIAA championship picture, and unfortunately, it has just not materialized. You know, they suffered their first conference loss against Fayetteville State, the team that I slept on, the team that I thought was on a down slope, that was, you know, trending down, and their time as championship contenders was gone. They lose convincingly to Fayetteville State after that fourth quarter. They succumb to a fourth quarter avalanche. And then they lose to Johnson C. Smith. Their only win against a conference opponent was a game that didn't count as a conference game. You know what I mean? Through 3 weeks, it looked like they were trending in the right direction. They beat Barton like they were supposed to. They dropped the ball against Norfolk State, but they showed promise, and they looked like they were going to be a team to be reckoned with once they got into conference play. And they escaped by the skin of their teeth against Winston-Salem State after Winston-Salem State missed the extra point that would have tied the game. So they looked like they were trending in the right direction, but then Fayetteville State, they just didn't have what it took to finish that game, and Johnson C. Smith thoroughly outplayed them. So yeah, Virginia State is their chances of making it to the championship game is looking very slim now that you have teams like Fayetteville State, you have teams like Virginia Union, Johnson C. Smith, and Livingstone, all still either unbeaten in conference or only has one loss in conference so far. So they're gonna have to run the table and pray that those other teams slip up. But yeah, it's been an unfortunate start to the season for Virginia State. Still plenty of football left to be played, but it's looking bleak right now for Virginia State. Next up, we have Shaw. They have AD. Didn't really expect much from Shaw this year, but I thought they would at least show signs that they could be a player going forward. Got thoroughly dismantled by Virginia Union and gave up the first conference win to Bluefield State since they joined the conference. We'll get into Bluefield State in a second, but yeah, outside of a win against Lincoln, which they were supposed to win, I haven't seen much going forward, much optimism for Shaw going forward in terms of getting back into contendership. But look, this is Lamar Manigault's first year. You can give them some grace. They were never going to be a CIAA contender this year. That wasn't going to happen. So that wasn't the expectation. I don't think people should have that expectation of them this year. But hopefully going forward, this is something that they could build upon and that they'll eventually get there. But right now, they're at a D. Next up, we have Winston-Salem. 1 second. Next up, we have Winston-Salem State. That I gave them a C-. They are one of many teams that I gave a C-. Winston-Salem State C- comes as a result of expectation. I expected Winston-Salem State to be much better than what they are. I expected them to be in the championship picture, and they still potentially could be if they run the table. They have a very tough schedule going forward. They go on the road to face Johnson C. Smith and Fayetteville State. So that's pretty tough. And so yeah, their championship hopes are hanging on by a thread, but they could still potentially do something. But that, like I said, that Virginia State loss was gut wrenching. Needing the extra point to go down to be able to win that game, and even though it didn't count it didn't count as a conference game toward Virginia State's record, it did toward Winston-Salem State's. Fair or unfair, it's how it is. And so they have that conference loss on their books. They did beat Bowie State, but like I said, Bowie State was very competitive in that. And yeah, and they thoroughly beat Lincoln. So shout out my guy Chris Stevens in the chat. WSU Ram Nation is not going to be happy about this. If WSU Ram Nation was real with itself, he'd probably say that's a pretty good ranking. He probably would expect more of Winston-Salem State than I would. By the way, Chris Stevens has check out, if you're not familiar, check out Chris Stevens' show, the MEAC and More with Chris Stevens. Usually airs on Wednesdays at noon right here on the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. So check his show out. You will not be disappointed with anything that you'll see Chris Stevens on this channel. But yeah, Winston-Salem State, give them a C minus. I probably a victim of my expectation of them, but they played some pretty good football, especially given the circumstances, behind their season so far. But yeah, C minus. Now on to Elizabeth City State. Now I know what you're thinking. How is a team that is 1-4 this season only a C minus? How are they not? How are they a C minus? Because their win is a quality win. That win against Livingstone is a great quality win. This was a Livingstone team that was undefeated in conference and looking like an overachiever, and they stopped their momentum. So I give them a lot of credit for that. Even though their chances of to get to the CIAA championship game is virtually impossible. I see no chance of that happening, but I give them a lot of credit for competing and for getting them a quality win when there was a guy in our comment section who's been saying for weeks that he expects Elizabeth City State to knock somebody off. Well, it happened. They did it against Livingstone. So shout out to them. So for getting that win, and hopefully Adrian Jones can continue to build with this team, and they show a little bit of that expectation that I had of Adrian Jones when he was at Shaw. Hopefully they can become that team. There was once upon a time Elizabeth City State used to run the CIAA North when the CIAA North was a thing. They used to run that division, and they fallen on hard times, haven't had a winning season in well over a decade. So they got a good quality win under their belt on that, but unfortunately that's their only win, which is why they are a C minus. In all actuality, it probably should be a D, because at the end of the day, it is just one win, but I'll give them credit because it is a good quality win. Next up, we have Bluefield State, and they also have a C minus. Now, again, if you watch Bluefield State, it doesn't seem like they've had the most impressive season, and they have not. They're 2-3. They did get a win in a game that they were supposed to against Concord, and they beat Shaw, the team that I just recently talked about. I give them credit for, I up their grade because I give them credit for this being their first conference win since joining the conference. And that's historic, and it's something to build on. This being the second season under head coach Davon Morgan. This has been a long time coming for them. And this is the first of what is hopefully many. They could go on a win streak, because next up they got Lincoln, then they got Bowie. I don't see a win for them against Bowie. That might be my bias talking, but I don't see it. But who knows? They could have their first CIAA win streak. Should they beat Lincoln next week, this upcoming Saturday, I mean. But yeah, I give them that credit for getting over that hump of finally claiming that long-awaited first conference win since becoming an official member of the CIAA. All right, now we get to the upper echelon teams in the conference, and we start with Livingstone, who I give a B. Now they have slightly overachieved based on expectation. They have a 2-1 record in conference, but that one loss was very damaging in a game that they absolutely should have won, and they just did not come prepared for. Livingstone was that team that I looked at and said that they could have been a sleeper coming into this season, and they still absolutely can be. They have a very good opportunity to knock some teams off their perch, including this upcoming weekend, because they have Fayetteville State, who we will talk about in a second. So they still could turn this season around, with a win against Fayetteville State, and cause some chaos in the CIAA standings if they get a win in that game. But for right now, that Elizabeth City State loss is looking very damaging, and they're gonna have to play catch up. But I do want to give them credit because that Allen win is looking impressive every week. Every week that we see Allen play, that Bowie State win is also a very impressive win, despite the fact that Bowie's 1-4. They do not play like a 1-4 team, and they won in the game that they were supposed to win against Livingstone. You know, and their only other loss is against a Charleston team who was one of the elite programs in Division II football. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, they outside of that loss to Elizabeth City State, they have played exceeded expectations that the I would say the general public had of them going into this season. So I'm looking forward to see how Livingstone progresses going forward, and if they could potentially give themselves a long shot chance to make it to the CIAA championship game. I can't think of the last time Livingstone made it to a CIAA championship game. I know they won a couple of CIAA championships in the 90s, but I can't remember the last time they were even in contention for a CIAA championship. It was probably then. So looking forward to see what they do for the rest of the season, and if they're able to continue to overachieve like they have been. Next up, we have Johnson C. Smith, who has an A-. Now, they have one loss this season, but that one loss could, like it did last year, take them out of the CIAA championship race. That loss to Virginia Union was, I hate to keep using this word, but damaging. But it was a very damaging loss for them, you know. And now they have to hope that Livingstone beats Fayetteville State this Saturday, and hopefully they gotta hope that Virginia Union loses to, you know, increase their chances of being able to get into the CIAA championship game. You know, we don't want to repeat it last year. And when I say we, I mean Johnson C. Smith. I'm not a part of that. I'm not a part of that. We don't confuse my term we. When I say we, I'm referring to Johnson C. Smith. Johnson C. Smith does not want to repeat of last year where they were performing very, very well, looking like a CIAA championship favorite through 8 weeks, and then let their foot off the gas in those final 2 weeks. They don't want to repeat of that. They suffered their loss. Hopefully they got it out of their system, as opposed to last year when they were coasting through the season and then got knocked upside the head by those final 2 weeks. Hopefully that loss can be like a wake-up call as to we don't want to repeat of last year, because they are very, very much talented enough to win this conference, like I expected them to at the beginning of the season. You know, I'm not as confident in that prediction now because of that Virginia Union game, but I like their chances to run the table. I do like their chances to run the table. I'm not as confident in that, but we got to see how it plays out. But this team is very much talented enough to get it done. Next up, we have Virginia Union. Now, outside of a controversial loss to Edward Waters, they have been the team that we have seen them be in the past 3 years, and that just shows you the tremendous level of coaching that they have in within their program. Speaking of coaching, I interviewed the associate head coach of Virginia Union, who has been a big part of building the running game for the Virginia Union Panthers since he joined the team in 2018. He goes by the name of Diego Rowland. If you are not familiar, I'm just going to share my screen so I can show you that article. Just give me 1 second. Hope everyone's enjoying their Thursday afternoon and, you know, enjoying this grade A content that I'm providing you. But let's see. Come on, man. Come on. What's taking so long? All right, here we go. Diego Rowland, the unsung hero of Virginia Union's championship team. I had a blast speaking with Diego Rowland, you know, getting his insight on his coaching acumen and what it took to build up this Virginia Union championship team. And we talked about a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I could not put in this article because it was just he gave me so much to write. It was an ordeal trying to figure out what to use and what to take out. But I really appreciate Diego Rowland for his time and allowing me to get just a little bit of insight into what it's like being a coach within a championship program like Virginia Union. But anyway, back to the business at hand. Now that that's over, Virginia Union, they get an A. They have been the team that we expected them to be outside of that. Like I said, that what was in an exciting game against Edward Waters, by the way, and an Edward Waters team that has exceeded expectations. We'll get into Edward Waters when we get into the midseason grades for the SIAC. But Virginia Union, the Curtis Allen has been the player that I thought he was going to be, and more. That he's on pace to break Jada Byers' record for rushing yards in the season. He is far ahead of the pace to break that record and could potentially set the touchdowns record because he has, I think, 14 through 5 games, which is incredible. So, yeah, Virginia Union A, and the only reason they're not an A plus is because Fayetteville State is an A plus. Fayetteville State, I said it before and I'll say it again. I slept on them heavily coming into the season. I was a bit disrespectful to Richard Hayes, putting them in 4 in the Division II coaching rankings. I expected there to be a drop off within Fayetteville State, and I was wrong. I'm not going to apologize because it was an opinion. I'm not going to apologize for an opinion, but I will admit that I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong to say that Fayetteville State was on a downslope. They have played like that team that made it to 7 straight CIAA championship games, and they could start a new streak this year and get back to the CIAA championship game. They have played that well. They have their biggest test of the year so far against Livingstone. We thought it was going to be Fayetteville State, and maybe it is Fayetteville State. Maybe Fayetteville State is that team. They just lost to 2 elite teams in Johnson C. Smith and Fayetteville State. But Fayetteville State, they have their first team with a winning record so far this season outside of Benedict and North Carolina Central. But yeah, we'll see what Fayetteville State can do this upcoming weekend against Livingstone. And if they continue to show the promise that they have through the first 5 weeks or 6 weeks of the season. All right, now transitioning to the SIAC. We're going to speed through these because we still got to get to our independent friends at the Division II level, and we still got to get to our NAIA folks. So we still got a lot of grades to give out, but appreciate everyone who is tuning in on YouTube, all those on Facebook. So we are going to go from the bottom up once again, and we're going to start with the reigning champions in the SIAC, Miles, who have an F. Been an unfortunate season for Miles. They're in their first season since moving on from Sam Shade, who is now at Alabama A&M, in their first season under Chris Good. And it has just not been at all close. None of their games have been close. I think the closest margin of victory they've had, the closest margin they were in this season. I got the schedule pulled up. Yeah, somehow they were in a 1-score game against Morgan State. Somehow Morgan State is the closest game they've had so far this season. But in their games against Division II opponents, they lost 45-3 to Virginia Union, 46-14 against Edward Waters, 45-19 against Savannah State, and 38-17 to Kentucky State. A lot of people saying, "Oh, this Sam Shade's just not there. How are they not able to clean it up when Benedict is doing what they're doing and they moved on from Chennisberry, two completely different teams with completely different levels of talent. Can't compare the two. And I'll get into why when I get to my grade for Benedict. But Miles is an F, and deservedly so, because outside of that Morgan State's game, for some reason, none of their games have been close. Another team who has not been even close in barely any of their games is Lane, who also have an F. Again, just like a different Miles, against Lincoln, Missouri, 27-15. Central State, 42-13. Albany State, 47-6. They did have a close game against Allen, 29-21, but they have just, as close as they have been, they haven't been close, if that makes sense. So it's been a rough season for Lane, who is also in their first season under a new head coach. So to be fair to them, they're starting over. This is a rebuild for them. And hopefully it gets better before it gets worse. But as of right now, it has not been very good for Lane, and they have an F. Next up, we have Tuskegee, who has a D-. Now, this is like I did for Winston-Salem State. This grade is based on expectation, and my expectation of for Tuskegee has been underwhelming based on the performance so far this year. They got a win against Winston-Salem State in the season opener, and they shut out Central State in their first home night game. But since then, nothing has gone right. Outside, not even including the Jackson State game, they lose 45-24 to Benedict. They lose in a one-score game to Fort Valley State, and then they lose to Morehouse, and that's what gets them to D-. All due respect to Morehouse, nobody could have expected Tuskegee losing to Morehouse, especially losing to Morehouse the way that they did, because they were up 17-0 on Morehouse, and they end up losing 27-20. That you can't have that. You can't have that. When you have a team against the ropes like that, you finish the job, especially considering you've lost your first two conference games. You can't let your foot off the gas, because you're fighting for your SIAC championship lives. So you can't have a game like that. So they're at a D-, and their chances of potentially making a run at the SIAC championship is looking slim, considering after they come back from their idle week, they go on the road to Albany State. Now said. So D- so far for Tuskegee. Now let's get to the team that beat Tuskegee in Morehouse, and I give them a D. And it's basically because of that win, because nobody would have expected them to win that game. It's their first win in any game since did they win a game last year? I think they won a game last year, but they ended a 10-game losing streak dating back to last year. And yeah, Morehouse is all like I said, I've always said this about Morehouse. They are always a team that plays hard. And if you decide that you want to let off the proverbial controller, they will beat some teams. And Tuskegee just happened to be one of those teams that let their foot off the gas, and they allowed Morehouse to get back in the game, and Morehouse finished the job. Do I expect them for this to happen again? Probably not. Who knows? I mean, they have Central State and Lane next. Those are two very winnable games. So who knows? Maybe Morehouse can go on a 3-game win streak, and I give them a B. Because that is absolutely a deserving of a B. If Morehouse can get a 3-game win streak, that would be huge for Morehouse. But for now, I give them a D, because that win against Tuskegee is absolutely a quality win, no matter what the standings say. So yeah, a D for Morehouse. Next up, we have Fort Valley State, and I give Fort Valley State also a D. It really should be a D minus because of that loss to Central State on their homecoming. But because honestly, hold on a second. I'm gonna make the executive decision that they absolutely do get a D minus. And it's because Central State has a better record than Fort Valley State, which I did not see coming. Did not see coming whatsoever. I get it. They're moving on from Sean Gibbs. This is Marlon Watson, his first season as the head coach of Fort Valley State. He still has a long way to go. It has plenty of time to turn this program around, but this is a Fort Valley State that we grow to expect consistency from. We expect Tuskegee. We expect Fort Valley State. We expect Albany State to be those teams that show what it means to be a consistent football program. And unfortunately, this is the down year for two of those teams. One of those teams is very much thriving. But, you know, it's been a rough year for Fort Valley State. But, like I said, they lost a lot through not only coaching changes, but through the transfer portal. So they still got plenty of time to turn this around. This year's a wash. So forget that. But going forward in years ahead, excuse me, they have a lot to build for. So, but for right now, D minus. Favors absolutely does looks worse than that. They look worse than a lot of people expected. So it's not just you. It's not just you that who they haven't lived up to expectation of. They haven't lived up to a lot of people's expectations. But hopefully they're able to get it back. Clark Atlanta Fort Valley State is a team that has that football pedigree. They are a football school. So it's in their nature. They will turn it around. Now to the team that was in the SIAC championship game last year, Clark Atlanta. And they have a D. Now, this does not seem fair, and it's not really fair because the man that they expected to be their starting quarterback going into the season, Zy McDonald, he is now hurt. And the backup quarterback, Xavier Jackson, who filled in for him, he has played incredible. So why are they a D? Because they are 1-2 in conference and they're 2-3 overall. Now, again, they had injuries, so it's not fair to count that against them. Well, I can when the losses are 49-38 to Allen and 59-24 to Benedict. You know, they found a way to win the game against Fort Valley State after the injury to Zy McDonald. So good on them for making that happen. But yeah, they are a long way from the championship picture, which they were expected to be in their second season under Teddy Keaton. And it's not fair to them, but hey, this is my ranking. These are my grades. So, you know, but yeah, all seriousness though, I expect them to be a lot better. Not this upcoming week because they got Albany State. That's more than likely going to be a loss for them. But after that, they could potentially, well, maybe not because they got Edward Waters and Kentucky State. Anyway, Clark Atlanta, they've fallen slightly short of expectations, but injuries they had to overcome. But even outside the injuries, they haven't, you know, looked like a team good enough to win at all this season. Even when they were healthy, they looked pretty good against they looked very good against Valdosta State. Did not look good at all against Florida Memorial though. They didn't at all look good against Florida Memorial. And Fort Valley State, they won that by the skin of their teeth. So it's been touch and go for Clark Atlanta with or without the injuries. But, you know, may or may not be fair to give them the grade that they have, but hey, they could just prove me wrong for the rest of the season. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens. Next up, we have Savannah State, and they have a C minus. Now, I'll be very honest with you. I have not been able to watch much of Savannah State this year, especially since I wanted to watch Savannah State this year. But one game I did see of them was the Edward Waters game in the season opener. And that was a precursor to what we have seen transpire with them so far, that they are not ready yet. They're not ready yet. You know, they lost to Kentucky State, a team that has somehow surpassed them. Not somehow, because we saw the potential from to Kentucky State, but yeah, Savannah State, they look behind schedule. They very much look behind schedule, especially when you look at teams like Central State, look at teams like Allen, like I said, Kentucky State and Edward Waters, who you could arguably say they were maybe slightly ahead of at one point, and now Savannah State has been pushed back a little bit of those teams. Honestly, C minus a little bit generous, you know, but we'll give them a C minus for now, you know, because I got to give them grace because the SIAC is a loaded conference this year. That may sound hypocritical based on what I've been saying, but the SIAC is a very competitive conference this year. So getting a win in this conference is remarkable, you know. And speaking of that, we have the next team on our list, which is Central State. Central State get to see they have exceeded expectations. I expect them to show a little bit of promise, you know, with all the NFL stars that they have on their coaching staff, you know, and I expected there to be some show of maybe not this year being a championship caliber team, but maybe showing that they can eventually get there. And I've seen signs that they can eventually get there. I always known Central State to be a team that is a tough out. They were a tough out for a Clark Atlanta team that was a high-powered offense last year. So I saw that ability to be one of those headaches for, you know, the and the potential to be a headache in the SIAC, you know, and they're fulfilling that potential that we saw from them. You know, they got the win over Lane, and a convincing win over Lane, by the way, 42-13, a very convincing win, you know, and beating Fort Valley State on their homecoming. And we're not going to talk about what happened after the game, but, you know, yeah, so I like the potential of Central State, and I'm looking forward to watching them going forward. I look forward to watching all of the teams in the SIAC outside of the bottom two, unfortunately. But SIAC, you can't go wrong with SIAC football. It's arguably the most exciting conference to watch in all of HBCU football. So yeah. Next up, we have Allen. Allen is another pleasant surprise that we have had this season. You know, they looked at one point like one of the more high-powered offenses in HBCU football in general. You know, especially with that win over Clark Atlanta, that high-scoring win against Clark Atlanta. You know, and yes, they have a 2-4 record, so their record may not be indicative of their grade, but in terms of the play on the field, look, I'm gonna full disclosure. A lot of these grades are going to sound hypocritical, but hey, look, I'm gonna stand 10 toes in it, you know. But Allen, their record may not be indicative of a C plus, but you watch them play and how they hang in there with teams that they should have absolutely no chance to beat. I want to I give them credit for that. You know, and I like their chances to come up with some significant wins as the season goes on, and they have a chance to do that. They have Savannah State this upcoming Saturday. They got Tuskegee in Tuskegee. They got Morehouse and they got Edward Waters. They got a good chance to get some quality wins under their belt. So I like this Allen offense, and yeah, they have a chance to get some pretty significant wins. What you mean we don't set the times? What you mean? I scheduled this. This was scheduled. Come on, Adrian. Getting into our next team, we have Kentucky State. Now, Kentucky State is a team that I didn't know what to expect from them coming into the season, but they have exceeded all expectations that I have had from them. So let me get their grade up real quick. And A-. Full disclosure, these last 4 teams are going to all be A or not. So spoiler alert. Kentucky State, they have looked like a championship team this year. Full props to Felton Huggins for having this team looking championship ready. The only reason they're not an A flat is because of the Albany State game. They got beaten in that game. Albany State is clearly the better team, so can't hold that against them. But that's why they get the minus instead of just an A. But a lot of people say they got robbed against Grambling State. They probably should have won that game. And then handling their business against the teams they're supposed to beat. Morehouse, Savannah State, and Miles. They are supposed to win those games, and they did win those games, and they did it convincingly, and it wasn't close. Excuse me. The balance that they put into their offense, Torrance Bartle, who they brought in from Langston, has given them the balance that they needed to make them the elite offense that they are. And yeah, I like what Felton Huggins has done with this team. He has them trending in the right direction. And yeah, Kentucky State. I don't know if I expected them to be in a championship picture, but they are firmly in it, and I like their chances to get a couple of wins and make this SIAC championship race interesting down the stretch of the season. Next up, we have Albany State, clear A+. Arguably the best offense in Division II HBCU football, and maybe even the best offense in all of HBCU football. I get it. Alabama State is going to be at the top of the discussion for a lot of people, and rightfully so. Andrew Body is at an incredible season, and Alabama State is looking like they are ready to get over that Jackson State hump this weekend. Everybody's looking forward to that game. It's the game of the weekend for sure. But back to the Division II side of things, Albany State, probably the most impressive offense we've seen, most fun to watch offense that we've seen in a long time. Isaiah Knowles he was out the last game and a half, and they found a way to get it done without him. And that's what sealed the A+. It's not just the fact that they played without Isaiah Knowles in their last game against Lane. It's the fact that they played without him, and the game wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. Like the quarterback play wasn't there in that game, but it didn't matter. They just thoroughly outplayed Lane as if he was there. Like, you would look at that final score and think he was there. No, he wasn't. He wasn't. So Albany State, hopefully they get Isaiah Knowles back before the end of the season and they're able to make a SIAC championship run. They're more than likely going to need him against Clark Atlanta. That's going to be a tough game. So hopefully they get him back sooner rather than later. But with the way that they're playing, I'm not sure it'll really matter. I think they'll be just fine without him. They'll probably need him to win the championship, but to get there, maybe not. Well, they probably will because the top of this conference is loaded. Speaking of, we have Edward Waters, and they have an A+ as well. Considering Toriano Morgan stepped down from this team a day or two after SIC Media Day, they brought in Brian Jenkins Sr. as the interim coach. Well, not brought in, like he was already on the staff. But you bring in Eric Dooley as your offensive coordinator. You have Noah Biden, and they have just exceeding expectations is not even a strong enough term to describe what Edward Waters has done this season. They have played above and beyond what anybody could have ever expected they could be this season. So much so that them being in an SIAC championship game would not be shocking. It would not. And that is remarkable given how they came into the season, how they got here. It is absolutely remarkable. Their passing game is one of the more underrated in HBCU football. We talked about the Albany State offense, this Edward Waters offense. There have been times during this season where they look virtually unstoppable. And that all comes down to coaching. And personnel has to get the job done on the field as well. So props to them. But the fact that they have showed the poise that they have when a lot of people would have crumbled under the adversity that they faced coming into the season, Edward Waters is absolutely warranting of an A+. And rounding out the field is the last remaining unbeaten team in HBCU football, the Benedict Tigers, who are looking like they're going to make it to their third SIAC championship game in the last 4 years. Last year was a down year. That was a year of growth for them to find what their niche was under Ron Dickerson. And I came into the season saying Benedict is most likely to be the biggest overachiever. And lo and behold, Benedict has been the biggest overachiever. Especially considering Darius Ocean did not start to begin the season, which I thought was a mistake. And they won anyway. They shut out their first two opponents, especially that shutout win over Fayetteville State is looking a lot more impressive every week. And they just kept winning. And I'm not sure I see a path for them to lose anytime soon. If we look at their remaining schedule, let me see for a second. Their remaining schedule is, so they have Fort Valley State this upcoming weekend. Then they have Edward Waters. Oh my goodness, that Benedict Edward Waters game, Lord have mercy. That's going to be a good E. You got Benedict, so you have them against and then they have Albany State. That's a 2-week gauntlet. We're going to find out if Benedict is for real in those two games. We're going to find out if Benedict is for real. So, Benedict has been the biggest overachiever so far. Will that continue to be the case? We'll see. But Benedict absolutely is deserving of an A+. Real quickly, because we're reaching the hour mark on the show, so let's just fly through the independent HBCUs at the Division II level. We start with West Virginia State, and I'll give West Virginia State a B-. Now, West Virginia State, they moved on from Joel Felder. He transferred out. So the guy that was your 1,000-yard rusher the past 2 seasons is now gone. And it's been a seamless transition. They They went on a 3-game win streak. They put up 60 points against Fairmont State for the homecoming, you know, but they ran into West Liberty in a very high scoring game, but they gave up a 28-point avalanche in the fourth quarter, and that lost to West Virginia State. That's just something you can't have, if you're trying to compete in the Mountain East Conference. That is a very good conference, by the way. A lot of people don't know much about the Mountain East Conference. That's where Charleston is, the team that beat Livingstone, that was a powerhouse at the beginning of the season, this upcoming year. See, I told you, Chris. See, I told you. If he's real with himself, he'd agree. But yeah, back in West Virginia State. Yeah, I think it's fair to give them a B minus. Hopefully they're able to overcome that loss to West Liberty and keep themselves in the race for the Mountain East Conference. They're currently 2-1 in conference. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes for them. Next up, we have Lincoln, Missouri, and we're going to give them a D+. And that's because this is a team that is not used to winning. Plain and simple, they're not used to winning. Last year, I believe they went 1-9 or something like that last season. And they started off the season this year with 2 wins, one of which came against Lane. So they have overcome the stigma that they have that has been bestowed upon them in the past. Of course, their first win was against Lincoln, California. We don't credit that one much. I credit the Lane win much more than I do the Lincoln, California win. And had a very competitive game against Quincy. But since then, they've lost by 20+ point margins in their last 2 outings. But I give them credit for the Lane win. In all actuality, it's not really an impressive win because Lane hasn't really showed any kind of promise of being a good team. But yeah, I give them credit for the win because it's not something that they're not used to winning. So the fact that they won consecutive games, I got to give them credit for that. Now let's get into the NAIA teams. We're in the home stretch now. We're the final 4 teams, the NAIA teams. I'm not going to grade Barber Scotia. This is their first season back in football. Not really fair to give them a grade for their season. So we're going to move on to the NAIA teams, and we're going to start with Florida Memorial, who I'm going to give a B+. And that's mainly because of the win in their conference opener against Southeastern. They had a rough start to the season. They lost a high-scoring affair against Reinhardt. They were very competitive against Clark Atlanta, but lost in that game. And they've won their last 2, including against Southeastern University, which was their conference opener, and a game that they don't usually win. They've won the last 2 against them, but they had lost the last 3 previous to that. So the fact that they have improved and gotten wins against a team that they don't usually beat, and the circumstances surrounding the team is also very important. Moving on from Bobby Rome, being in the first season under Michael Jones, and moving on from Walter Wilbon, who was your star running back last year, who was your dynamic running back, who was big in the passing game and out of the backfield for you. And they've overcome all those losses and have still found a way to be a very productive team. So I give them a lot of credit for that. And yeah, so B+. I'm just going to group the last 3 teams in the NAIA and just say, Langston, they looked like a team that was going to eventually turn that corner and become that championship I mean, not championship team, but like take that next step to becoming a contender. And they've started off the season 1-4. Not particularly fair because they played against Grambling and they played against UT Rio Grande Valley. But I can hold that Ottawa Arizona game against them when they lost 52-10. And their only win has been against Texas College, who has fallen back into being the Texas College team that we know them to be, which is the team that a win is hard to come by for them. So after the season that Texas College had last year, you were hoping you would see a repeat of that. That has not materialized. And they have the season that they are having right now. And Arkansas Baptist has been the usual Arkansas Baptist. Not much to say about them, So, and I'm not grading Virginia University of Lynchburg. Y'all all know they get an F. Y'all know they get an F. They do have a win in this season though, but it's against a team that is just started back football. So, not really fair to grade that. So, that was all the grades for the Division II and NAIA HBCU football teams. That was a mouthful. I need some water. So thank everyone for watching. Please, if you can, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. Please subscribe to become a level 1 or 2 member to get all the exclusive content from the HBCU Sports team. Follow us in all of our social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. Search HBCU Sports and you'll find us there. And you can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU Sports. Until next time, I am Jared Hoffman. See you guys.